All right, diving in today with Pastor Jerry Eze, and this sermon, it's called Family Breakthrough Service.
Yeah.
Powerful stuff, right? I mean, have you ever felt like your family's maybe a little stuck?
Oh, absolutely.
Like just kind of, same pattern, same problem, same...
Yeah, like a broken record.
Yeah, exactly. And Pastor Eze seems to think that family is at the heart of, well, everything,
Yeah.
and offers some pretty interesting ideas about how to actually, like, shift those patterns, break out of them.
Yeah, for sure. The family unit is definitely front and center in the sermon.
Yeah.
He even compares God to a family man, who's deeply invested in the well-being of families.
Mm.
Makes you think about what that means for us,
Well, it
right?
really does. And then to take it a step further, he suggests that the devil actually, like, targets families
Mm-hmm.
specifically, like all the tension and conflict, just the tough stuff that families go through.
Yeah.
Could there be like a spiritual dimension to that?
It's a really interesting idea. Makes his message of family breakthroughs even more urgent, don't you think?
It really does.
Like there's a battle being fought for our families,
A battle. Wow.
even if we don't always see it.
That's kind of intense.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it
It
is.
makes you wonder about like what it means when we view God as a family man, right?
Mhm.
Does it limit our understanding of his power? How does it fit into like the bigger picture of the Trinity
Yeah.
and God's relationship with all of humanity?
Okay, so let's break this down a little.
Yeah.
So Pastor Eze is saying that God's deeply invested in our families.
Yeah.
The devil's trying to mess them up.
Right.
And then there's this possibility of breaking through those negative patterns.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And to illustrate this idea of breaking through, he uses the story of Elizabeth,
Right.
who was barren for years,
Okay. Okay.
and then miraculously conceived.
The story of Elizabeth. Okay, so barren for years and then miracle baby.
Yeah,
That's powerful.
it is.
But it makes me think about, back then being labeled as barren
Yo,
socially.
huge implications.
Huge implications.
Absolutely. I mean, in that time, a woman's worth was often tied to her ability to have children.
Yeah.
Imagine the pressure, the shame, the isolation Elizabeth must have felt.
Well,
It's not just personal, it's a social stigma.
that's such a good point. I bet a lot of people listening can relate to that feeling of being stuck,
Right.
whether it's about kids or not, just like something's missing.
Right.
Yeah,
It's a universal feeling.
it is.
And that's what makes this story so powerful, right? It speaks to that deep longing for wholeness.
Yeah.
And Pastor Eze is suggesting that God can step in and just like radically change our circumstances.
But what's interesting is he doesn't just focus on the miracle.
Right.
He talks about how God often closes one chapter
Yes.
before opening a new one.
He does.
Yeah.
He specifically says, as he was ending barrenness, he was opening the history of a virgin conceiving without a man in her life. A chapter was closing and a new chapter was opening.
Wow.
Heavy stuff.
It's like we have to let go of the old before we can really grab onto the new, right?
Exactly. It makes me wonder about personal responsibility, too, Like,
Yeah.
do we always need a miracle? Or can we take steps to close those chapters ourselves and start fresh?
That's a great question. It's like he's highlighting this divine power, but maybe there's a human element too.
Yeah.
Like we have to be open to change, to letting go in order to experience those breakthroughs.
Absolutely. And that's where I think this deep dive gets really fascinating.
Okay.
It's not about just waiting for a miracle.
Right.
It's about understanding how it all works, the spiritual and the human,
Yeah.
and recognizing that we play a part in shaping our own destinies,
Yeah.
even within God's plan.
So we've got God as this family man, the devil after our families, the potential for breakthroughs, this whole idea of closing chapters.
Yeah.
It's a lot,
Yeah.
but it definitely makes me think about my own family.
Me too.
Yeah.
And this is just the start. In part 2, we'll go even deeper into his strategies for actually breaking those negative cycles
Okay, I'm ready.
and creating lasting change within our families.
All right, let's do it.
Back again for more of Pastor Eze and family breakthroughs.
Yes, it's fascinating how he connects those huge ideas of, divine power and spiritual warfare to like real family life,
Yeah.
our everyday experiences.
Yeah, it's like these cosmic sources are playing out in our kitchens,
That's that
our
thing.
living rooms.
And speaking of those everyday moments,
Yeah,
one thing that really stood out was how he focused on parenting,
right. Yeah, he emphasizes how our own childhoods,
Yeah.
especially those tough ones, really shape the way we parent, often without us even realizing it.
Totally. He even said something like, some of us were raised with fear, taught to be small, to put others first,
Mm,
even when we were more capable.
right.
And I've caught myself reacting to my kids in ways that are just like my parents.
Yeah.
And I swore I would do things
It's
differently.
so common, you
Yeah.
know, and it gets to the heart of this breaking negative cycles thing.
Right.
Because if we're unconsciously repeating those patterns,
Yeah.
what are we passing down to our kids?
Yeah, it's like those patterns become part of our family DNA,
Right.
passed down from generation to generation.
It's true.
What kind of legacy are we creating?
Yeah,
Are we empowering our kids or holding them back without knowing it?
that's the question, right?
It is.
It's the tough question every parent has to wrestle with.
And it's not easy to break those patterns, but Pastor Eze offers some hope.
He does.
Yeah.
He reminds us we're not alone in this.
Right.
To seek guidance and support.
Yeah, he actually said, if you've not encountered God, you have nothing to hand over to the next generation.
That's good.
That's powerful.
It is.
Like our connection with God is the key to those breakthroughs.
Yeah.
Not just for us,
Right.
but for our families too.
For everyone, yeah.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of that story of Zechariah, Elizabeth's husband.
Right.
He got the promise of a child
Right.
while he was serving in the temple.
Right.
And Pastor Eze kind of suggests that there's often a special encounter that happens when we're in that place of service.
Yeah, he even said something like, sometimes we're blocking negative things from happening in our families just by serving.
Exactly. He said there were things you were serving and blocking arrows without even praying, just by serving.
Wow.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's like our service becomes this shield,
Right.
deflecting all that bad stuff.
Yeah.
It's inspiring, but kind of mysterious too, don't you think?
A little bit, yeah. And that's where this whole idea of divine favor comes in.
Okay.
He's clear that it's not just our efforts, it's God's grace.
Hmm.
It's his choosing.
Right, and he uses the story of Mary and Zechariah to illustrate that.
He does, yeah.
They both question how these miracles could happen, but they get very different responses.
Very different. Zechariah is silenced, almost punished for his doubt.
Wow.
But Mary, she gets this gentle explanation and just like this outpouring of grace.
Yeah, and Pastor Eze says that difference is because of the high favor God had on Mary.
Exactly.
It makes you think about those times when things just seem to fall into place.
Right.
Maybe even unexpectedly. Have you ever experienced that, like divine favor was at work?
I think we all have those moments
Yeah.
when we look back and we sense a guiding hand in things.
Mhm.
And Pastor Eze seems to suggest that we can invite that favor into our lives.
Okay.
Not by earning it, but by aligning ourselves with God's will.
It's almost like surrendering, isn't it? Not giving up control, but recognizing there's a bigger plan.
Yeah,
Right.
it is. It's hard in a world that values independence so much.
It is.
But it's also freeing because we don't have to do it all ourselves.
Mhm.
You know, we can rest knowing God's got this.
Yeah.
He's working behind the scenes.
So we've got God's love for families, the devil trying to break them, the potential for miracles, closing those negative chapters,
Right.
and this mysterious favor that we can't earn, but we can invite.
You've really captured the heart of his message.
It's a lot.
It is, yeah.
But he doesn't stop there.
No, he
He
doesn't.
goes even further,
He does.
exploring how these spiritual dynamics show up in our relationships.
In the fabric of our families.
That's what we'll get into in part 3.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
The nitty-gritty of how these concepts, favor, service, breaking those cycles, play out in our everyday interactions.
Because it's in those everyday moments, those
Yeah.
little exchanges, that the real transformation happens.
We're back. Final part of our deep dive with Pastor Eze, family breakthroughs.
It's been quite a journey, right? God's love for families, spiritual battles, divine favor,
Yeah.
and breaking those negative cycles.
And you know what strikes me as we wrap up is how Pastor Eze brings together these huge ideas with a real down-to-earth sense of hope
Yeah.
and practicality. Yeah, it's not just these abstract concepts.
No.
He actually gives us like tangible ways to use them.
Exactly. It's like, okay, God wants our families to thrive, but how do we actually make it happen?
That's the question.
How do we invite that favor in and create positive change?
Yeah, and one of the things he really talks about is this concept of fullness,
Yes, that's a good one.
that imagery of an overflowing cup.
Yeah.
When we're filled with God's love, it just spills out to everyone around us.
Beautiful, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
Can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
If we want our families to experience that abundance,
Yeah.
we got to be connected to the source.
And this is where service comes back, right?
Yes.
Pastor Eze suggests that aligning ourselves with God's will, that's one way to fill our cups.
It's like service becomes this conduit
Right.
for those blessings to flow through us.
Yeah, we become channels of grace
Yes.
for ourselves,
So-
but also for those we love.
Exactly. And remember, it doesn't have to be these huge, showy things.
Right? He talked about that.
Yeah, even those small acts of service
Mm.
can have a ripple effect, that
Yeah.
protection around our families.
But then he brings up emptiness,
Right.
almost like a warning.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Fullness can be contagious, but so can negativity.
And resentment, oh, it can spread.
It spreads like wildfire.
So again, personal responsibility, we have a choice, right?
Yes, absolutely. Every single moment.
We can choose love,
Joy.
joy,
Gratitude.
or we can let that negativity take over.
Powerful, isn't it?
It is. It's not about just waiting for something to happen to us.
No.
It's about taking charge of our spiritual well-being
Yes.
and making choices for positive change.
Intentional choices.
He's the example of Mary visiting Elizabeth. Remember that?
Oh, yes. Powerful.
Elizabeth being filled with the Holy Spirit
Yeah.
just by being near Mary.
Just by being in her presence.
Mary was so full of God's grace, it overflowed onto everyone around her.
It really makes you think, what kind of energy are we bringing into our homes?
Right. Are we radiating joy and peace?
Yeah.
Or are we carrying all that anger and resentment?
That's the question.
It's like a spiritual check-in.
Exactly.
Am I being the presence in my family
Yeah.
that I want them to experience?
Am I modeling what I hope they'll embrace?
And it's not about being perfect. We're all a work in progress.
We are.
But Pastor Eze is saying that even small shifts in our attitudes,
Yes.
even our behaviors, can have a huge impact.
Like that butterfly effect, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
One tiny change can ripple out in ways we can't even imagine.
And when we think about families,
Yeah.
how connected they are, it's even more powerful.
And that's the heart of his message. It's not just about listening to a sermon and feeling good.
Right.
It's about taking those ideas and using them,
Putting them into action.
creating that culture of love, grace, spiritual growth in our homes.
Yes.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, Pastor Eze challenges us to become, he says, agents of transformation
I like that.
in our families.
Big responsibility.
It is. What does that look like for you? What seeds of love and joy
Yeah.
can you plant today that will grow for generations?
It really is a question worth thinking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Our legacy isn't about stuff. It's about the values, the love,
Yeah.
the spiritual foundation we build.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into family breakthroughs. We hope you feel challenged and equipped to create positive change in your own families.
In your own lives.
Until next time, keep diving deep.